May I see the hands of those of you who have heard me before? 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. May I see the hands of those of you who have not heard me before? Aha! Well, I'm going to have to repeat some things. I would like to begin by following the Eastern custom that before any talk is given on the Holy Scriptures, we say the Lord's Prayer. We say the Our Father in the Aramaic language, in the words in which it fell from the lips of Jesus 2,000 years ago. So picture with me what it was like by the Lake of Galilee. Near Easterners do not picture Italian Renaissance provincials like we have in our wonderful oil paintings. To them, he was a rabbi. He's rather tall. Jesus was a Galilean. Galileans were rather tall, so they picture somebody about 6 feet tall. His beard would be neatly combed and parted down the middle, which was the fashion for rabbis in those days. His hair was not shoulder length, like the Italian provincials. It was longer than mine. It was neck length, but it was not shoulder length. And he would be wearing a cap that would be halfway between a skull cap and a fez, like a raised skull cap. Jesus would never be without that cap, because that was a sign that he had studied with a rabbi, that he himself was a rabbi. This is from a time which is so old that you did not take your hat off to go in the presence of royalty, but you put your hat on to go in the presence of royalty. And our brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith adopted the habit of wearing something on top of their heads as a reminder that we are always in the presence of royalty, because we are always in the presence of God. Jesus of Nazareth would have kind of a swarthy Mediterranean look because he was always walking, he was always itinerant, and he had eyes that burned right into you. He was in the transitional phase of history when teachers went from sitting to standing. Before Jesus, teachers always sat, and their pupils would come to them and bring their problems, their issues, and the teacher would gaze into their eyes and discern what they needed to bring them back into balance. And then he would say something to them, and another group would leave, and another group would come up. And one of the groups that came to him said to him, Rabbi, which is a very affectionate term in Aramaic, our teacher, teach us to pray. And he said, when you pray, pray in this manner. Wundwishmeya netkadash shmach, te'ete malkuta, nechwe sovyanach e kenna dwishmeya appara'a. Haul and lachma di sunkanan yaumana. Wa shwoklan haubein e kenadachanan shwakan el hayavein. Ula ta'alan el nisyona. Ella pasan min bisha. Mitol de lachim el kuta. Uhay la utishbokta. La alam Olmin. Amen. There is one major difference between the prayer in the Aramaic language and the way we pray it in English. And that is in the verse that says, Ula ta'alan el nisyona. It was rendered in King James, lead us not into temptation. But I could show you in James chapter 1, verse 13 of any translation where it says, let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither does he tempt anyone. So Dr. George Lamza, who came to America, a native speaker of the Assyrian Chaldean dialect of Aramaic, which the scholars had thought was a dead language. which he grew up a native speaker of. When Dr. Lamsa looked at that verse and was translating the scriptures, he rendered it, "Let us not enter into temptation," because he said it's parallel. The words are parallel to what Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Awake and pray that you enter not into temptation." But there's one more thing I'm going to tell you, which will probably shock you. I always shock people. I love to shock people. If you look up the word nisyona, which was translated as temptation, in Penn Smith or in Brown, Driver, and Briggs, one of the really good Aramaic dictionaries, it can mean temptation. It can mean trials. It can mean struggle. It can mean hard living. And there is a historical custom. The last thing any wife would say to her husband before he went on a journey was, "Ula ta'alan el nisyona." Don't let us enter into struggle. In other words, take care of yourself and come home safely. Don't let us think that we have to face life without you. So substituting that back into the prayer, Jesus of Nazareth is having us say to God something like, don't let us be atheists. Don't let us be agnostic, because that's a hard way to live. Don't let us think we have to face life without you. It's a different slant on lead us not into temptation. Don't lead us into hard living. My name is Wyming, like the state Wyoming without the O, and that is my real name. My dad was full-blooded Chinese, and he won a scholarship to come here and study to get his master's degree. And my mother was a Southern Belle, and they lived in the same apartment building when he went to college. This name was on a list of names that my Chinese grandfather wrote and sent to my dad when my mother was carrying me. It's a literary name. My dad read the list of names to her and asked her to choose one and spell it. And so she chose this because it's like the state Wyoming without the O. So she could think of a way to spell it. Before there was such a thing as a public opinion poll, the Emperor of China used to send people out to collect folk songs. And this is the refrain to one of those songs. This is how the Emperor found out what people's concerns were. Wyming is the refrain to one of those songs, and it means something like to carry all the people in your heart. It's very patriotic. It's a literary name. It isn't a run-of-the-mill name. And anyway, that's who I am. And our topic today is the Great Shepherd, a psalm of prosperity. Because even though the 23rd Psalm has comforted millions of people, it is not really a psalm to soothe people when they're grieving. It's something else. It's a recognition of the good that is already there. And so I'd like to share with you a few of the little insights from the Aramaic text as we exegete that psalm a line at a time. Now, King James says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And of course the lines are familiar and they're soothing to us because they're familiar. Did you know every place in the first part of the Bible where you see the word Lord, it's a euphemism. It's a word to avoid saying another word. Now, I don't like to say the Old Testament because that's unkind to our brothers and sisters of the Jewish faith. I prefer to call it the Hebrew Bible or the Tanakh, which is an acronym for the Torah, the Nevi'im, and the Ketuvim. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the Nevi'im, the books of the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the wisdom literature. So every place that the word Lord is mentioned in the Tanakh or in the Hebrew Bible, it is a euphemism. The Lord is a translation of Maria, Lord Yah. And that is a substitution for the 4-letter name of God. You didn't know God's name was a 4-letter word. YHWH, the tetragrammaton. Yod, He, Vod, He, or Yod, He, Wav, He, depending upon the dialect, is the name of a different god, really. Because the ancient world was full of local gods. Every mountain had a god, every river had a god, every forest had a god. You know, when you come to Norwalk, that feels different from when you go to Stamford. And that feels different from when you go to New Haven. That different feeling that you get when you go into a different town, that different personality, the ancient people called a god. But when Abraham migrated from Babylon, from Ur of Chaldea to Palestine, his God was a God that was not confined to a locality. We have lost the pronunciation of the second syllable. We do have the first syllable, Yah, because it survives in some names. Aliyah, my God is Yah. We don't know if it was Yahweh. Some people, some rabbis think it was Yahweh. We don't know if it was Yahoo. Martin Buber thought it was Yahoo. Wherever God is around, it's always Yahoo. Or Yahweh. There were some rabbis who thought it was Yahweh. We've lost the pronunciation of the second syllable. But this is the name of the desert God. This is the name of the God that isn't confined to a locality, and therefore the God who is the God of freedom. This is the traveling God. This is the unlimited God. So when you say, the Lord is my shepherd, the God of freedom shepherds me. Shepherd, ra'ah, to shepherd, is an act of leading the flock and bringing it to places where it will be safe and where it can feed and water. The God of freedom shepherds me. I do not lack anything at all. So this is the first affirmation in this psalm. The God of freedom is shepherding me, guiding me, leading me. I have everything I need. And then David lists a series of things that he has from the shepherd. He makes me to rest in rich pastures. Because sheep have to be pastured every day, or they lose their strength quickly. He leads me beside refreshing waters. It was translated still waters, but the word there has more impact. It is the word niche. Niche. Niche is the feeling that you get when you wake up in the morning and you've had a good night's sleep and you're refreshed and your muscle spasms are released and you feel like you can start your day. It's a light, energetic feeling that you have after a good night's sleep. Should I tell you something rather amusing that Jesus of Nazareth said? In the 11th chapter of Matthew, he said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, learn of me, and you will find rest for your souls, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Well, that can sound a little solemn. We've heard that said on solemn occasions. It was actually something delightful to the people who listened to him. Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you niche. Because that's what it says in Aramaic. I will give you niche. Take my yoke upon you, the burden of my teachings, the chores you have to do to fulfill my teachings. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Because I'm meek and lowly in heart. I'm not proud like these teachers that make you do a lot of things. And you shall find niche for your souls. Because my yoke is niche and my burden is light. It's actually quite funny in Aramaic. Because he's punning between easy and refreshing. My teaching is refreshing. So, going back to the 23rd Psalm, he leads me beside refreshing waters. And he has restored my soul. We're going to have to spend a couple of minutes on this because this is so important. Ancient religion contained a soul craft. People were taught how to comfort the bereaved, how to pick people up when life knocked them down, how to put your friend back together if they've gone through a relationship that's broken up, how to lay hands on people and pray, how to help people pull their souls back if they were in some kind of distress. All of that was part of ancient Christianity because it was part of ancient Judaism. I'm one of those people who thinks that Jesus of Nazareth was a Kabbalistic rabbi. If you look at the last line of the Our Father, the Lord's Prayer, thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. Whoever wrote that knew his Kabbalah. Whoever said that knew his Kabbalah. And so, he has restored my soul. Because in the ancient world where they lived on the edge of the desert, not in the desert, but on the edge of the desert, water was so scarce, sometimes people were parched and they were dehydrated and their minds weren't as clear as they should be. And if somebody gave you a drink of fresh water, you've saved my life. You've restored my soul. My soul has come back to me. In the Garden of Eden story, it says God breathed into man's lungs the breath of life, and man became a living breath. Because that is the word nafsha, soul. And it's a pun. It's a play on words. God souled into man's lungs the soul of life, and man became a living soul. And King Solomon said, keep your soul with all diligence, because from that come all the issues of life. Jesus of Nazareth said in I think the 16th chapter of Matthew, what would it profit a man if he gained the whole world and lose his own soul, his own sense of being alive? Soulcraft is a vital part of spirituality. And it was filtered out when Christianity went through medieval Europe because it began to be taught by clerics and not by mystics and healers. So it was taught by people that didn't have experience helping other people with spiritual means. And to me, spirituality is like learning to play the piano. It helps if you're gifted, it helps if you practice, and it helps if you have good teachers. You know. We don't all start out in the same situation. The more we practice, the more we get out of it. And that's why we come here on Sundays, isn't it? To this wonderful church. To practice. To practice healing our souls. To practice healing each other's souls. In an earlier part of my life, after my father passed away, I was counseling a client. This was in New Orleans. And she had this, I could tell she had been crying. And I said to her, I see that you've had a misfortune. And she nodded her head. And she was choking back tears. And I said, do you want to tell me about it? And she said, you'll know. People always want me to manifest some kind of psychic ability. You know. I've always been a spiritual adventurer. And I've always been a healing hobbyist. And I was very lucky about teachers all my life. I studied linguistics with 2 pupils of Noam Chomsky. I studied classical feng shui as a healing discipline with the 4th ranking master of the Blue Dragon lineage. And it was my incredible good fortune to study the Holy Scriptures with Dr. Rocco Errico, who taught us all the deep meanings of the Scriptures and who taught us the soul craft. So I said to this girl, you've fallen in love with somebody, but it isn't working out. And she said, that's true. And it turned out the gentleman was married, and she did not know. And I said to her, there's only one thing that's going to work out before anything else can work out. And that is your relationship with the spiritual world. That has to work out. And I said, you've given him your soul. And this is not to say you've done something terrible, it just doesn't work. You know, there's nothing more intuitive with people than to send their heart to somebody when the relationship isn't working out. It's the first impulse, just like scratching an itch. It's the first impulse we get. And it never works. Because he can't miss you as long as your energy is all around him. He can't feel that you're not there. And when he looks in your eyes, he can't see the girl he was fascinated by. Because your soul isn't in you, raising the light up to your eyes. The Chinese call this energy the shen, the spiritual energy up to the eyes. That's the only thing anyone's ever fallen in love with, is someone else's soul. You can desire someone for their physicality, but you can only love them for their soul. And so I said to her, take it back. And it kind of shocked her out of her crying. I said, take it back. Take it back while I'm here to help you. I don't know how. Well, can you imagine him where he is, somewhere on the other side of town? Can you see him in your mind's eye? Yes. Can you see the bands of energy around him? Yes. And I said, of course, the inner bands belong to him, but some of those outer bands belong to you. Take them back. Use your breath. Every time you inhale, pull the outer 1 or 2 bands back into you. Pull it back. And she started to do it, and I said, I know you're reluctant because you're afraid if you do this, you won't love him anymore. But you cannot love somebody effectively when you're all pulled apart. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. When we're admonished to avoid certain practices, it's just because they're more trouble than they're worth. They never pay off. They never help us to attain what we want. Take your soul back. Take it back. Pull it back. And I said to her, I asked her his first name, and I said, he is not the source of your love. God is the source of your love. He is not the source of your peace. God is the source of your peace. He is not the source of your joy. You made him all your joy. That's a lie that you told yourself. He could be your favorite joy, but he could not be all your joy. You enjoyed things before you met him. Take it back. Take your soul back. Pull it back into the middle of you where it sits. Where the image and likeness of God sits enthroned and raises your vitality and raises your resistance to illness, because she looked very peaked. She looked like she was about to be quite ill. Take your soul back. And what happened was her skin color came back. And when she opened her eyes, I said, are the colors in the room brighter? Yes. Are the sounds in the room just a little bit crisper? Yes. You did it. But I'm not so naive as to suppose you won't be tempted to do this again. And when you do it again and you catch yourself, remember what we did and pull it back. Take your soul back. And I don't expect people to do this, but she came back to me later with a $20 bill and paid me $20 more than I had charged her for the session. Keep your soul with all diligence, because from your soul come all the issues of life. When your soul is in you, you are guided. When your soul is projected outside of you, the guidance is elusive. You have some faint inkling of guidance, but you can't quite grasp it. So you must take your soul back from whatever it is that you've wanted so much that you've despaired of getting it. You must take your soul back. And this is part of the ancient religion. And in the modern world, we have left out so very much. The God of the desert, the God of freedom shepherds me. I have everything I need. He makes me rest in rich pastures, and he has restored my soul. He has restored my soul. He has brought me back to myself. This is practical Christianity. Not pretending that we don't have difficulties, but knowing that you can call your soul back to yourself when you face difficulties. Is this interesting to you?
Yes. Yes. Very good. Yes.
I don't want to make you listen to something that isn't interesting to you. He has restored my soul. He leads me in paths of justice, because shepherds make treaties to have the right to use somebody's well. He leads me in places where I'm entitled to go, so the sheep don't get confiscated by people for trespassing on their land. And then this phrase was put with the wrong verse, but then the punctuation was added in the Middle Ages anyway. Because of your name, the sheep is turning to speak directly to the shepherd. Because of your name, yea, though I walk through the valley in danger of sudden death, I will fear no evildoer, because you are with me. So the shepherd is always guiding the sheep into places where it's safe. But if you do have to pass through a dangerous place, the shepherd is there with you. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me, because the rod is a little switch that the shepherd uses to keep the sheep on a safe path. And the staff is something the shepherd uses to fight wild animals. And the shepherd is very careful not to let the sheep get hooked up in anything where it can't move around. Sheep will climb up into a rocky place and try to graze on bramble bushes, and then the wool gets hooked up in the thorns. And if the shepherd doesn't find it, that sheep will die, because it will either starve to death, or a wolf or a bear, some predator will find it there, and it will have a stationary prey. It will have a stationary animal. So what does the shepherd do? He finds the sheep and he takes out his knife. He tries to unhook the wool, but if he can't, he's going to cut just enough of the wool to get the sheep free of that thorn bush. And then the sheep scampers off and lives out its life. Because there never was anything wrong with it, it was just stuck. Of course, that doesn't have anything to do with us. You know, we don't get stuck from time to time. I realize that stopped happening sometime during the Roman Empire. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. You have set tables before me in the presence of mine enemies. I mean, talk about prosperity. When somebody is mad at you and they don't want to see you do well, the best thing in the Near East is if you can throw a party and invite everybody, because that means you've got so much. You've got food you can share. And then the enemy goes, why did I say that? I made a fool out of myself. Why did I say what I did about this person? You set tables before me in the presence of mine enemies. You've anointed my head with oil. This is so important. If you want to know what it means to be a Christian means to be an anointed one. Christos is a Greek word that is a translation of the Aramaic word Mashiach, from which we get the word Messiah. Mashiach comes from the root word moshka, which means oiled. In the ancient world, you do not crown a king, you anoint him. In the ancient world, you do not ordain a minister, you anoint them, because they live on the edge of the desert where it's dry, and they want to save the water to drink. So when the scalp gets dry and uncomfortable, they pour oil on it. So this is washing your hair. It is an outer cleansing that is symbolic of an inner cleansing. Because in the ancient world, people would grow up in their own tribe, their own family. And they would learn, they did this to us, and we did that to them, and they owe us this, and, you know, all these different parochial things, these local little things that happen to their group. But if you're going to be the king, you have to be the king for everybody. So your head has to be washed, which means that your mind has to be washed. Healthy brainwashing. You have to have a mind that's clean of all these distinctions between your tribe and someone else's tribe. If you're going to be a minister, your head has to be cleaned. So a Christian is a little Christ. A Christian is a clear-minded one. When we say the name Jesus Christ, we are saying Jesus, the clear-minded. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
He has anointed my head with oil. He's made my mind clear again. And my cup gives joy like pure wine. Surely your goodness and your compassion have followed me. Followed is okay, but it's kind of a weak word. The word that is used there is the word radpun. Radpun. You know, when Abraham's nephew Lot was kidnapped by the 10 mayors of those little towns, don't think of a king of a huge European country. Think of a king of a small town. Those 10 kings kidnapped him. And Abraham radpuned them from Dan to Beersheba, from one end of Israel to the other. To radpun means to hunt. It means to stalk. It means to pursue. So the psalmist is saying to the shepherd, your tender mercies and your compassion have dogged me, even when I wasn't paying attention, have stalked me, have chased me, hot on my trail, all the days of my life. Whether I paid attention and received it, or whether I ignored it and you followed me, continuing to try to give it to me. They have stalked me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the God of freedom for the length of my days. As long as I have days on this planet. Rivers of living water flow wherever you are. The green gardens of paradise are wherever you are. And the great shepherd is giving you more prosperity than we even recognize wherever you are. That is the great shepherd. Now, I will say a word about our seminar this afternoon at 12:30. I'll take a few minutes. I realize I've probably run over. But when Jesus of Nazareth sent 70 of his disciples in the 10th chapter of Matthew, he said, go first to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And those 70 disciples went up into Assyria, into southwestern Turkey, northwestern Iraq, northeastern Iran, to the valley of Kurdistan, 7,000 square mile valley. And they spoke to these descendants of the 10 lost tribes. And they taught Jesus of Nazareth's insight into the spiritual teachings of the Hebrew Bible. And they brought with them a ritual, which we're going to do this afternoon. A ritual where you not only receive some of the breath of God, but you open up your hands so that you can be a funnel for the breath of God to others who need it. That's what we're going to do this afternoon. And so I will see all of you, or as many as of you would like to make it, 12:30. Thank you. God bless.